I am Caroline Cox and the CEO of Heart, and I speak on all the behalf of our small home team to thank you very, very much for your support for our work. Very briefly, introduce myself and introduce Heart. All I have to say about myself is I'm actually a nurse and a social scientist by intention and a Baroness by astonishment. I wasn't into politics, so much so I was the first Baroness I'd ever met. And it comes as quite a shock. You wake up one morning and find a Baroness looking at yourself out of the bathroom mirror. But of course, a huge privilege. So I asked God how I should use the privilege of being able to speak in the House of Lords, as what happens to become a Baroness. And the message came very clearly. It's a wonderful place to be a voice for those who do not have a voice, or people who have voices whose voices are not heard. So I established Heart to help fulfill that mandate. Now, Heart is based on the fundamental principles of working with and through local partners. We don't go in and do our own thing. We find people in difficult situations who represent their own communities and who mobilize and enthuse their own communities to deal with the priority needs which they identify. Heart is based to provide both aid and advocacy with our partners, because our partners are in places which are largely unreached by major aid organizations. That happens because the big aid organizations like the UN and so on can only go places with permission of the sovereign government. If the sovereign government is victimizing a minority, it doesn't give them permission, the big aid organizations can't go. Or they don't go because of security reasons, because they're often in conflict zones or post-war zones, and there is a high security risk. But because you work with local partners, they're the ones who are indigenous. They'll be living that insecurity anyway. There is a risk in visiting them, but what a privilege. And our partners are amazing people holding front lines of faith and freedom for their own communities. Being a Christian organization, we try to follow the biblical mandate to heal the sick, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and speak for the oppressed. It doesn't say just the Christian hungry, the Christian naked or oppressed. So we are available for all in need with unconditional love, aid, and advocacy. Most of our partners are Christian because Christians are suffering the greatest persecution in the world today. But very briefly, I'll let you know which countries we work in. First of all, starting in Africa, we work in Nigeria, which is currently suffering the most horrendous, we've called it New Party Parliamentary Group, possibly genocide, but the massacre of thousands of Christians and some Muslims who won't convert to the Islamist ideology. And there are millions displaced. The needs are enormous. And parts of those needs are what's called middle belt. And the British government isn't providing aid to middle belt for some reason. I don't know why. Can't get a sensible answer out of them. But we are certainly trying to provide aid and advocacy as much as we can for our partners in Nigeria. Then also working in Sudan and South Sudan. And this time last year, we were visiting that area, and there's a disputed territory called Abyei between Sudan and South Sudan, whose location into which of those countries has not been identified. So it's an unrecognized territory. And the Dinka people, the Christian people, suffer horrendous attacks from the Arab and Masuriya people, supported by Khartoum. And when we were there just over a year ago, we visited the immediate aftermath of a massacre, where we saw bodies still burning in their huts and mass grave being dug. I mean, it was just a scene of horror, and we'll never forget it. I just had a letter for the anniversary of the massacre at the place called Kolom in Abyei. So we work there, do what we can to help. In South Sudan, we work with Archbishop Moses Deng with a number of programs for displaced people, health and food, and also college, trying to provide education, theological education, and other education for people in the capital city of Bahr Ghazal called Wow. And then we work in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, which has recently suffered a horrendous war. Nagorno-Karabakh is historically Armenian land. There are churches that came back to the 4th century there. But Stalin located it with his divide and rule policies into Azerbaijan. And in November, Azerbaijan released, October, a horrific war using illegal weapons such as smirch and cluster bombs on civilians and missiles of all kinds. And well, I'm afraid that war lasted about 40 days, but thousands were killed and a peace agreement was signed which gave much of Nagorno-Karabakh back to Azerbaijan. And they have many Armenian prisoners, mostly prisoners of war, soldiers, but some civilians. And there are horrendous videos of the torture, mutilations, and maltreatment unleashed on those prisoners. And in some cases, they take the phones of the prisoners, photograph all that happening, the torture, the execution, maybe beheadings, and send it back to their families. So that needs a lot of prayer, unresolved problems there. And then very, very briefly, we do what we can to help in Syria and further east in Burma. We help people on the eastern side of Burma, in Shan and Karen states and Kachin, who we don't hear about. The Rohingya are suffering. I don't in any way belittle their suffering, but they get all the attention and all the aid, and thousands of displaced and others affected by war on the eastern side are really largely off the radar screen and need a huge amount of help. So that's where our work is in Burma. And we just concluded a program in East Timor, Timor-Leste it's now called, helping with children who are malnourished, and a very successful program there, which has just been completed. So those are our areas and why we work where we do. And very, very briefly, I'll just give one example, because our partners are inspirational. They are real miracle workers. And to go back to that little historically Armenian land of Nagorno-Karabakh, suffering that war, we had a rehabilitation center there. We always ask our local people what their priorities. They said, please, the Soviet Union has no provision for people with disabilities. They gave us a bombed out old school. There weren't any buildings that weren't bombed out after a previous war. And our inspirational partner there, Varden, has turned it into an internationally recognized center of excellence. People come from over the world to see it. The range of therapies and the caliber and the incredible professional competence of the staff and the different therapies they offer. They just opened a school for youngsters with autism, and it is a place of real inspiration. Of course, in the war, it had to be left. They've now gone back very, very courageously and are looking after their previous patients together with a lot of injured soldiers from that war. So that's what we do in Heart. And we would really appreciate, or we do really appreciate your support. We appreciate your prayers for our partners. Please do look at our website, www.heart-uk. So, well, we'll come back and correct that one. But do look at our website and see our wonderful partners and the work they do. And we'd love to be in touch. If you want to be in touch with us, you know how to find us, and we can put you on our mailing list with newsletters and prayer letters and so on. So thank you for your support. Thank you for this opportunity to share the pain and the passion and the privilege of making a difference. And we have a little motto in Heart. They're very small. Our Heart home team is only 5 people. But our little motto is, I cannot do everything, but I must not do nothing. And what a privilege it is to be able to do something for those heroes and heroines on their front lines of faith and freedom. Thank you so much, and God bless.